In this hands-on lab, we're going to spin up our first EC2 instance and SSH into it. We're going to spin up a Linux T1 micro. The T1 micro is free tier, which means that a single T1 micro is free for perpetuity. There will, however, be an EBS volume attached to this, and that should only run you about pennies per month. You can leave this up for the rest of the course. It's required that you first create a cloud account with AWS. It's also required that you use an SSH client. Popular options are PuTTY for the PC or iTerm for Mac. Also highly suggested that you review the security groups, key pairs, and user data course, as well as the EC2 disk options course. Beneficial would be reviewing the EC2 gotchas deck and templatizing servers with AMIs. Also highly suggested that you have some Linux familiarity. If you don't know what the commands cd, ls, top, cat, and pwd do, you might want to review a Linux for Dummies book. Also having some SSH familiarity will help. If you're using PuTTY, you're going to have to convert your .pem file to a .ppk in order to log in. Although we don't cover that in this course, there are lessons to do this readily available on the web. Again, we're going to set up an EC2 server, we're going to log into that server, and we're going to poke around a bit. If you've not logged into the AWS console, please do that at this point. Next, we're going to click EC2. Here you should see the same thing that I'm seeing, 0 running instances, volumes, key pairs, and so forth. This just means that you haven't got anything running yet. Let's go ahead and launch an instance by clicking this big blue button. The classic wizard is what we're going to want to use, so let's go ahead and push continue. And here we're going to use the Amazon Linux AMI. Although your number after this may be a bit different, this is the AMI that you're going to want to use. Amazon Linux is a CentOS variant, and it comes with some pre-installed interfaces into Amazon. Let's go ahead and push select to choose this instance. Here we can change the number of instances we're going to spin up and the instance type. You can also choose to launch in VPC or specific availability zones. Let's just go ahead and go with the defaults. As this page is loading the kernel and the RAM disk, let's look a little bit at some other things in here. If you want to enable CloudWatch metrics, you could click Enable CloudWatch Detailed Monitoring. You can also specify the user data, and you can turn on termination protection and specify the shutdown behavior, as well as deciding to launch into an IAM role. This being the first time we're getting in here, let's just go ahead and leave everything as default and push continue. The T1 micro comes with no ephemeral disk, so this root volume that we're actually provisioning is an EBS disk. Let's go ahead and push continue here. Tags allow you to simplify the administration of your EC2 servers. Let's go ahead and push the value parameter and let's type in a name of my first server for the name and push continue. We don't have any key pairs yet, but let's go ahead and create a key pair called production. And let's push create and download your key pair. Now notice what happens when we do this. When we've downloaded our key pair, it downloaded to our browser's download folder that individual key. It's very important that you save that key and you remember where it downloaded it to. You're going to need this to log into your server. This being a new server, Amazon's created a security group on our behalf. The TCP port of 22 or SSH is open to the CIDR block everyone. Let's go ahead and override the group name and the group description here, and let's specify my first server SG and the group description throw away security group and push continue. This final page just gives us a last ability to review and change anything that we want to. Everything looks good to me, so let's go ahead and push launch. It now reports back that an instance ID is spinning up. We can add some alarms, we can create EBS volumes, and we can check the instances on the instance page. Let's go ahead and click the last link here. Now, although you'll probably only see a single server, I have 2 terminated instances that show here. I left this up to show you that instances once terminated will still display Web GUI for a bit. So once you're terminated an instance, don't be surprised if it still appears here. If you want to get rid of that, you can just go to All Running Instances in the Viewing tab. Let's do that now. So you're going to see that your status checks are coming up. We cannot yet get into this instance because it's not done setting itself up. Let's go ahead and wait until this says 2 out of 2 complete. And let's keep clicking refresh up here in the corner to check it. So it now tells me that 2 of my 2 checks have passed, and this server is ready for me to log into. Let's go ahead and pull up our terminal. I use iTerm on the Mac. And my key has been copied to my desktop. So if I do an ls production.pem, I'm going to see that key. Let's go ahead and try to SSH into my server with this key. If we hop back to our web view, our web GUI, let's go ahead and click My First Server and roll up this details view a little bit. If we scroll down, we're going to see that DNS has been provisioned for this server. Again, this public and private DNS is going to change every time we stop and restart the server. But for right now, this is how we can get into the server. Let's go ahead and copy this information for public DNS into our buffer and go back to our terminal. I'm going to try to SSH, being on Linux, I'm going to push -I to specify my key, type in production.pem, and the user that I'm using for Amazon Linux is actually ec2-user @ and here I'm going to specify the DNS that I just put in. So I copy and paste that back in. It first tells me that this authenticity of host is not in my keychain. Do I want to add? I'm going to type yes to allow, and immediately you should see this warning as well. Unprotected private key file. This isn't anything to worry about. This actually just means that your key permissions for production.pem are too open. Let's go ahead and change the permissions to something a bit more restrictive that SSH will like. I'm going to chmod 600 production.pem. And now let's try our command again. I SSH-I production.pem ec2 user @ DNS name. Let's see if it works this time. Excellent. Looks like I'm in. I am now actually logged in to my server that I just spun up. Here I can run top to get a view of the server. I can see the amount of memory used. The load average, of course, is nothing, so on and so forth. Let's do something interesting and just type yum update to see what happens here. And actually, more accurately, let's type sudo yum update. We can see that even though this is a brand new AMI, there's a lot of packages it's asking me to install. This is a good best practice to go ahead and install this. So let's push Y and wait for all these packages to install. Let's now do something that we mentioned in the key pairs, security groups, and user groups deck. Let's curl our metadata endpoint. http://169.254.169.254/latest/meta-data. And let's actually put a slash on the end of that. So this is important to note. You do need to have a slash on the end of the metadata and user data endpoints. But this will essentially give us data about various parameters that Amazon is maintaining on our behalf. We can here, for example, type in AMI-ID at the end, and we can see the AMI ID that we spun up with. We can also curl the user data endpoint, /user-data/. And we see that we have no user data entered. This is common if we have no user data for this. Let's go ahead and go back to our web GUI. And at this point, you may want to terminate your instance if you decide you don't need it. If you did want to delete your instance, you're also going to want to delete the volume as well. Let's click on volume and see what volumes it created for us. We can see that it created an 8 GB volume on our behalf. Again, the T1 Micro does not come with ephemeral disk, so this is the only way the server can boot. If you click back on dashboard, you have a view of everything that was created on our behalf. The running instance, the volume, the key pair, and an additional security group. Although I recommend leaving this instance up for the rest of the course, you may want to terminate it now. Instead, I'd go back in here and poke around a bit, see what else you can do with the terminal. I invite you to explore your EC2 instance. As of Q1 2013, a single T1 Micro is free, all year long for perpetuity. Please double check with AWS to make sure that that is the case as you're viewing this video. Feel free to leave this server up and explore it. Again, we've tried yum updates. Try also stopping and restarting the server. Do Linux sysadmin stuff that you expect to do normally, and see what happens. This has been spinning up your first EC2 instance.